I'm here at LSI Europe in Barcelona with Ken Mariash of Sinaptica Therapeutics. Ken, thank you so much for joining me in the studio.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about Sinaptica?
Yeah, so Sinaptica is developing a totally new way of treating Alzheimer's. It's a drug-free, non-invasive neuromodulation approach. It's focused on modulating a new network in the brain that we've identified that's associated with episodic memory. It's the default mode network, and we're lighting up that network with massive amounts of magnetic field that induce current in the brain, but non-invasively. And so the patient comes back every week for 25-minute sessions, and we're strengthening the network by inducing neuroplasticity in that network. We're basically counteracting the disease process of Alzheimer's by strengthening the neurons in the network and thereby bending the progression of the disease. And we're showing 82% slowing of the disease in mild to moderate patients in 6 months. Really incredible result. In my view, it's unprecedented.
I've seen that you are a seasoned veteran within the neuromod space. There are a lot of innovators and innovative companies in neuromodulation today. Why come to Sinaptica?
Yeah, so I love neuromodulation. I love the idea that it's targeted therapy. You know, you take a drug and inject it into a vein, it goes all over your body with all kinds of unknown side effects, right? With neuromodulation, we can be very precise in what we're hitting and what the waveform is that we're delivering to the body and having a modulation effect on big biological systems and organ systems in the body. So I've always loved neuromodulation. But what is cool about where neuromodulation is going is that it's going non-invasive, or at least less invasive. We're no longer necessarily having to put leads in the brain, for example, to target certain structures. We can hit those structures non-invasively. And so my last startup was a non-invasive, and this startup was also capitalizing on 3 areas where I feel like I have a lot of experience. 1, capital sales, 2, neuromodulation, and 3, Alzheimer's. I've had 2 previous experiences in Alzheimer's, and so this will be my 3rd. Spoiler alert, the last 2 failed.
Third time's a charm.
3rd time's a charm.
How does Sinaptica differentiate itself then from some of the other early stage companies that are developing solutions to treat patients with Alzheimer's?
Well, we've been trying to, for a long time, target amyloid. And decades and billions have been spent targeting amyloid. And it's sort of like cleaning up the ashes after the house is already burned down. I mean, there's something in the disease process that involves amyloid. And we're not sure exactly where it comes into play, but it's probably more of a covariant than a cause. And so now we're starting to look at different mechanisms. You know, I call amyloid like the usual suspect, right? So we're going beyond that. And as I said, the default mode network is this brain network that is responsible for episodic memory and introspection. Now think about this. Where you integrate your memories is in the default mode network. So you're building this internal narrative, this sense of self. So it's not an overstatement to say that this might be where our sense of self is built. Alzheimer's patients will often report in the early stages of the disease that they no longer feel like themselves. They say, I no longer feel like myself. There's something strange. I feel like I'm not me anymore. And so, you know, that's sort of a clue that something is disconnecting. And we think it's the default mode network, which is very strongly correlated with the disease progression. And so this is all new. All previous attempts at Alzheimer's stimulation have involved different targets, and none have involved personalization and precision. We're taking a targeted approach to this. Where you stimulate and how you stimulate is critical, in our view, to getting these spectacular results.
Is it a treatment that needs to be continuous, or is it enough to just come in for a session every now and then as required and get the same benefits?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of neuromodulation in the past has been focused on daily stimulation. These are elderly patients. The question we were trying to ask in our phase 2 was, can we back off to weekly stimulation and still get a good result? So our paradigm involves jump-starting the brain by doing daily induction, and we do that for 2 weeks daily, and then we back off to weekly stimulation. And you know, if it was my mother, which it could be actually, I would get her in the car and I would drive her to her sessions if it meant the difference between her being in a nursing home and forgetting my name versus holding on to her sense of self and living independently? Of course I would. So although it may seem like a bit of a burden to come in every week, it's certainly less than dialysis. And dialysis patients are 92% compliant. So the dosing regimen, we believe, is acceptable for most patients. If all that means is preserving the essence of who you are, absolutely, people will comply.
So I know that you've been to an LSI event before. You're here in Europe now after joining us in Dana Point earlier this year. What made you decide to come again?
Besides the invitation.
Yes.
And besides the fact that it's in Barcelona. I think you guys put on one of the best, if not the best, shows in medtech. And everything runs like clockwork. You have some of the best investors here. The logistics are incredible. The social media presence is really interesting too, because you create a lot of virtuous cycle with the social media that you have out there. And the event last night was a lot of fun too. We were at a castle, basically. You don't really see that at a lot of conferences.
Or flamenco dancing, for that matter.
Yeah, amazing. No, you guys put on the best show in medtech.
So maybe coming back to where your company is at currently and where you're going, are you currently in human trial? What stage are you guys at right now?
Yeah, so we published, as I said, unprecedented phase 2 clinical trial results, sham-controlled, double-blind, 6-month results that are published in the prestigious journal Brain, which is out of the Oxford University Press. So we feel really good that that's a solid proof of concept study. It's a landmark study. Haven't seen anything like it. Not only did we achieve 82% slowing on the primary, we achieved over 80% slowing of the disease on 3 other secondaries, both cognitive and functional. And then you may be wondering, do we actually change the brain? We do. Not only did we change the signaling of the brain by raising gamma levels in the brain, but we also preserve the evoked potentials in the brain. And then, this is interesting, we have imaging data now that shows that we create new connections in the brain where we stimulate and across the network. We also preserve the microcortical structure as measured by this thing called angle R, which I could talk your head off about. And then lastly, we preserve gray matter volume. So the sham arm and the active arm both decline, but the active arm declines less. So we're preserving gray matter in the brain. We're literally changing the brain. So your question was about where are we going next? We're full steam ahead towards pivotal. We believe that we can march forward with this data and replicate it in a multi-center US EU study with a 1-year endpoint potentially that will make this state-of-the-art therapy available to patients in the US first and around the globe thereafter.
And I imagine that in order to get to pivotal, you're going to be raising money?
As always is the case, you're never not raising. We're really happy to announce we closed our seed round, and it's oversubscribed. We have the participation of some name brands that you'd recognize, a few of which we'll be making public soon. And now we're in process on a Series A that will fund that journey, build our clinical device, and initiate that pivotal trial next year, which will take us through FDA clearance, as I said.
Is there any advice that you would give to your peers in the neuromodulation space who are looking to bring a product that's addressing a severe unmet need like yours?
There's a lot of advice.
Just one piece.
Oh boy, if I had to pick one thing, like what's your bumper sticker? What's your billboard gonna say? What I found is who's on the rowboat is absolutely critical. You got to get the right people in the rowboat because you are fighting for your life, and everyone's got to be rowing in synchrony, and it does get tough, and you have to like who you're working with. And I love my co-founders, and I love the team that we've built. We have a fantastic VP of R&D who's literally built a system like ours before from the ground up. We have a VP of clinical who's just run a pivotal study with neuromod in Alzheimer's. There's only one person on the planet like her, and she is a fantastic fit for the team. So getting the right people on the bus is critical, and because you're going to spend the rest of, well, hopefully your journey will be a long one, the rest of your journey with these people usually.
So then how do you meet the right people then?
Yeah, I mean, everyone has a network, and 6 degrees of separation. In the medtech space is more like 2 degrees of separation. So
True.
We all know in our networks a lot of the right people, keeping the word out, using the network, letting people know that you're looking, and don't be afraid to put it out there. And Work your network as much as you can to get a few levels deep to find the right people.
Ken, this sounds like an incredibly promising treatment option for many patients with Alzheimer's disease. I thank you for stopping by the studio and telling me about it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.